All right, sir.
Mark, do you have her number?
Are we ready?
Alrighty, sir. I'm going to begin the bridge over to Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Almost ready, Peter Paul?
Alrighty, sir. ReMarcs is live.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's Thursday, March 4th, 2021. I'm Mark Morial, and this is ReMarcs Live. Last evening, I got a text, and it was a good news text. And that text was that the House of Representatives had passed, once again, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. You and I have talked at considerable length about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act over the last 6 to 8 months. And that bill is a bill now passed by the House, which would create a tool for greater accountability of police officers who shoot, who kill, who beat, who unconstitutionally treat people in our community, especially African-American men. Representative Karen Bass of Los Angeles, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus last year, has been the driving force behind the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, but it's been a team effort. It's included work from the civil rights community, and that's included the National Urban League, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the National Action Network, the National Council of Negro Women, the Black Women's Roundtable, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, and many, many others worked very closely with Ms. Bass. And as you know, we held a press conference last week calling on the House to act. And because you made phone calls and you weighed in, they have now acted. It would ban chokeholds. Chokeholds are what took the life of Eric Garner. It would ban no-knock warrants used in the Breonna Taylor incident. It would create a fairer standard by which federal prosecutors could bring criminal charges against police officers who violate the constitutional rights of citizens, and unlock this padlock that's been on the door of federal courthouses called qualified immunity to allow people to have redress in the courts when they've been unconstitutionally treated under color of law. That means by law enforcement. It would create a national accreditation system, which is a proactive effort, a national registry of rogue officers so that officers can resign from one department, go up the road to another department, present themselves, get a job, and leave their bad acts behind. the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is popular amongst the people, we move to the Senate, where Senator Cory Booker, among a number of others, are going to work very hard to get this passed. And we will be coming back to you, because once again, we're going to have to weigh in with members of the Senate. Some have said, I'll vote for a bill, but their thoughts are a bill that is weak, feeble, symbolic. We want a real bill, a substantive bill, a bill with teeth that is a tool to bring about change. And make no mistake about it, the George Floyd bill is not a magic wand, a panacea, a super pill. It is a tool. It is a tool, and I think it's the most important civil rights legislation since the big three of the 1960s, civil rights, voting rights, and fair housing. So I'm going to be working really hard, as will many, many others, to try to pass this bill in the Senate, to try to help people understand it, to try to bring education, advocacy, and yes, pressure, because the people want the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Now, jury selection will begin next week in Minneapolis in the trial of Officer Derek Chauvin, who has been charged with various offenses related to the death of George Floyd. And we'll bring you up to date next week on those proceedings and the progress of that trial. Now, the House of Representatives did something else very important. They passed H.R. 1, which is an important voting rights bill. We still need another voting rights advancement act legislation. I'll talk about that later, but this new bill that they passed would allow for online voter registration, same-day registration, controls on purging, which states like Georgia and others in Florida have used with impunity to suppress the vote and to block people from voting. It will allow the formerly incarcerated to vote in federal elections and mandate 15 days of early voting, among a number of other things. This bill is a good bill, an important bill, and we've got to push back on what I call Jimmy Crow. Who's Jimmy Crow? You knew Jim Crow. Jim Crow was the wicked segregationist of the first half of the 20th century, who blocked the door to courthouses, blocked the door to jobs, to housing, to voting, to elected office. Jim Crow carried out a reign of terror called lynching against our people. And Jim Crow was followed by his son. His son was none other than James Crow Esquire. James was more sophisticated than Jim. He engaged in deceptive discrimination, subtle discrimination, albeit still as pernicious. He blocked affirmative action. He's tried to repeal the Voting Rights Act. He's engaged in voter suppression. Now, as Jim moves on and James moves on, now we've got Jimmy. Jimmy Crow is the grandson of Jim Crow. And Jimmy Crow is mean and nasty. He engages in acts of insurrection against the Capitol. He promulgates fictional tales of fraud. He's involved in 40 states to suppress the vote. He's wicked. He's mean. He's not sophisticated like his daddy. Jimmy is more like Jim. And Jimmy is being helped these days by Jane. Jane Crow. Jimmy and Jane Crow. So let's be clear that what we're facing today, that the George Floyd Act and HR 1 seek to address, are fruit of the same poisonous tree that Jim Crow planted and watered on our parents, grandparents, foremothers, and forefathers. He doesn't want an America for all. He doesn't want an inclusive nation. He's not for freedom, justice, equity, and equality. He's for a nasty form of supremacy and hate and distrust. We're not going to let Jimmy and Jane rule the roost. We're going to challenge Jimmy and Jane at every single turn. That's why the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is so important. That's why the provisions of HR 1 are so important. And we'll be now focusing our attention on the United States Senate. And I'm going to bring to you, because we always want to educate, why the Senate is a unique institution whose seats are not allocated based on population, a body that has a number of arcane, and my word, archaic rules that sometimes stifle progress and allow a small group of people representing a small number, not a small number, but not the majority of the American people, to block progress. They did it, and you know it, in the 40s and the 50s and the early 60s, when the filibuster blocked progress on civil rights. We're back there again. We're seeing it repeat itself as Jimmy and Jane Crow, with reckless abandon, seek to recreate the ugly and dark days of voter suppression, the ugly and dark days of unmitigated violence like we saw in Charlottesville and at the United States Capitol. Our work must continue. We will fight nonviolently, intelligently. We will fight and we will work for an America for all, an America that embraces justice and equity. We will fight for the rule of law and the rule of reason in what we indeed do. So today, I'll ask you, 202-224-3121, find out if your House member, your congressperson voted for the George Floyd bill, the HR bill. Call them up and say thank you. Next week, we'll talk about how we engage members of the Senate on George Floyd and HR 1. We will not be silent and observant. We're going to be engaged, and I'm going to invite each of you to be engaged alongside of me and the Urban League movement and civil rights movement and civil rights allies and Black Lives Matter and young people and allies of all backgrounds, races, colors, creeds, and religions. Our movement, because we're trying to build a nation that's stronger, that's better, and that is truly a nation for all. So thank you for joining me today. Once again, it's Thursday. It's March 4th, 2021. And once again, may Vernon Jordan, our late great president of the National Urban League, transformative civil rights leader, lawyer, banker, mentor, friend of so many, may he rest in peace and may he rest in power as we continue to remember his contributions. Thank you. I'm Mark Morial on Twitter and Facebook and social media channels at Mark Morial, the National Urban League's at Nat Urban League. Join us, continue to be a part of the conversation. I'll see you on ReMarcs Live once again on Tuesday. Thank you. All right.